You've been lied to about the Nazi war machine. While Hollywood shows you tiger tanks crushing everything in sight, here's what actually hauled Hitler's army across Europe. Horses. 1.5 million horses. When winter hit Russia in 1941, those horses started dying. 750,000 dead in 4 months. What followed wasn't just military collapse. German soldiers turned on each other with bayonets over frozen horseflesh. Some units descended into something far worse when the horses ran out. This is the story they buried. The Nazi propaganda machine worked overtime to conceal one embarrassing truth. Their so-called mechanized army ran on hay and horseshoes. Joseph Goebbels issued a specific directive in 1940. Keep horses out of every propaganda photograph. Film only the 16 motorized divisions. Ignore the other 87 divisions that still moved entirely by horse. The cameraman followed orders. No horses in frame. Here's what Goebbels hid from the world. Hitler's 1941 invasion force relied on more horses than Kaiser Wilhelm's army in 1914. The Wehrmacht dragged 625,000 horses into Russia. Napoleon brought 180,000. General Franz Halder wrote in his diary on July 23, 1941, "We are demotorizing. This is catastrophic." He pleaded for trucks. Berlin shipped him more horses instead. Germany lacked the oil to fuel trucks, but they had millions of horses seized from conquered farmlands. So the Blitzkrieg became a horse-drawn army wearing a motorized mask for the cameras. Out of 103 German divisions in 1941, only 16 were mechanized. The arithmetic was brutal. 84% of the Wehrmacht walked or rode horses. If you're interested in how wars are actually decided by logistics, math, weapons, and doctrine, subscribe now, turn on notifications, and stay tuned for more in-depth World War II analysis. Let's continue. On August 15, 1941, a Wehrmacht photographer was court-martialed. His crime. He had sent photographs to a Berlin newspaper showing German artillery being dragged by horses through Russian mud. The photos never ran. The photographer vanished into a penal battalion. The world saw panzers. The truth looked nothing like that. Every German infantry division required 5,000 horses. A single division. Those animals consumed 20 tons of fodder every day, which raises the fatal question. What happens when you drag a horse-powered army into a Russian winter? Mathematics destroyed the German army before bullets did. Each horse required 20 pounds of feed per day and 30 gallons of water. Multiply that across 625,000 horses. That's 12.5 million pounds of feed every single day. German logistics officers discovered something in July 1941 that sent them into a panic. Russian grass had a different composition than German grass. Their horses couldn't properly digest it. Animals began dying of severe intestinal failure before they ever saw combat. The Germans resorted to shipping hay from France to Russia by rail, but those same rail lines were supposed to carry ammunition, so commanders were forced into an impossible choice: feed the horses or arm the soldiers. November 1941. The temperature plunges to -10 Celsius. Horses begin collapsing, not gradually, rapidly. At -20, they died overnight. At -40, they died within hours. General Heinz Guderian, the so-called father of Blitzkrieg, sent this dispatch on November 17th. "My tanks are halted, not by the Russians, by the failure of horse-drawn supply lines." December 3, 1941. A German supply officer named Major Friedrich Hosbach ran his calculations. He needed more trains to feed his horses than to sustain his entire division of soldiers. He wrote, "The horses are devouring this army from within." He requested authorization to shoot half his horses. Berlin refused. By December, desperate Germans fed their animals sawdust mixed with molasses. Then they ripped straw roofing from Russian farmhouses. Then they boiled leather harnesses into broth for dying horses. 6,000 horses perished every day in December 1941. Their bodies froze rigid within minutes. The Wehrmacht realized they were no longer fighting the Red Army. They were fighting thermodynamics, and thermodynamics was winning. December 15, 1941, outside Moscow. The temperature plummeted to -42. Private Wilhelm Lübke scrawled in his diary, The horses are finished, frozen solid where they stood. We tried hacking meat off with axes. The axes shattered against the flesh. We resorted to grenades. That was not a figure of speech. German soldiers hurled live grenades at frozen horse carcasses to shatter them into pieces they could eat. The blasts sent chunks of frozen meat scattering like shrapnel. But there were far more starving soldiers than dead horses. And so, the violence turned inward. The first documented killing over horse meat, December 15th, outside Klin. 2 German infantrymen drove their bayonets into a third soldier who tried to seize a frozen horse leg they had claimed. The military police made no arrests. They were gnawing on horse meat themselves. December 20th, 1941. The 4th Panzer Division established a formal horse carcass distribution schedule. Officers stationed armed guards over dead horses, not to defend them from the Soviets, to defend them from other German units. The roster specified which formation could harvest which horse on which date. Anyone who violated the order would be executed. Corporal Fritz Farnbacher wrote home, "We suck frozen horse blood the way children suck on sweets. It contains iron. It keeps us breathing." Some units devised something more disturbing. They kept mortally wounded horses alive as walking meat stores. They would carve steaks from living animals, then wrap the wounds to preserve what remained. A horse could endure 5 or 6 such cuttings before it finally collapsed. January 1942, Sergeant Klaus Becker's diary. "I watched men eat horse eyes raw. They said the fluid inside hadn't frozen solid. They fought over who claimed the eyes. This was no longer a functioning army. These were starving creatures in uniform, spiraling into madness, but some units had no horses left to fight over at all." The 2nd Army Corps was encircled at Demyansk in January 1942, surrounded and cut off. 95,000 men. They consumed every horse in 14 days. Then they chewed leather from their boots, then bark stripped from trees. Then soldiers began to disappear. Soviet intelligence officer Captain Mikhail Vulov uncovered the first physical evidence on February 8, 1942. His unit overran an abandoned German position. In the field kitchen, they found human bones scored with knife marks and teeth marks. A human skull cracked open, its contents removed. February 15, 1942. A German field kitchen at Demyansk. Soviet troops photographed what they discovered inside. Human remains in various stages of preparation. A partial torso submerged in a cooking vessel. Those photographs stayed classified until 1991. Stalin had no desire for the world to learn how far things had deteriorated. The Wehrmacht convened 42 courts-martial for survival cannibalism between January and March of 1942. Every record was incinerated in 1944 on direct orders from Berlin. General Walter von Brockdorff-Ahlefeldt commanded the Demyansk pocket. His confidential report employed the phrase extreme survival measures. He never defined the term. He didn't need to. A survivor who refused to provide his name gave testimony in 1962. "We drew lots. The man who lost walked into the trees. He never returned. We asked no questions. We lasted 3 more days. March 1942. The Demyansk pocket held for 60 days. When German relief columns finally punched through, they found 31,000 men still alive. Nobody inquired about the 64,000 who were missing. Nobody asked what the survivors had eaten for 2 months without resupply. The survivors never spoke of it. Not once. While Germans starved inside their encirclements, Soviet cavalry units stumbled onto a revelation. The Wehrmacht without horses could not move at all. December 7, 1941, Musino village near Moscow. A German artillery regiment sat completely paralyzed. Their horses had frozen to death overnight at -30. Their 2-ton guns might as well have been cemented into the ground. The Soviet 3rd Cavalry Corps found them at first light, Cossacks. The men the Germans had dismissed as medieval relics. The Cossacks charged with drawn sabers. German artillerymen tried to pivot their guns by hand, 5 men straining against a 2-ton cannon barrel. They managed to rotate a single gun 15 degrees before the horsemen reached them. The sabers fell. The entire regiment was dead in 20 minutes. 15. 100 men slaughtered because they had no horses to move their weapons. Captain Ivan Petrov led a Cossack squadron that morning. Their heavy guns pointed at nothing. We rode straight through them. They had rifles, but they couldn't flee. We cut them down like standing grain. This scene played out along the entire front. Soviet cavalry killed 15,000 immobilized German support troops in 6 weeks. Anti-tank guns that needed horse teams to reposition became steel coffins for their crews. Colonel Hans Meyer Welker survived a Cossack assault on January 3, 1942. They materialized from nowhere. Our guns were frozen in position. Soldiers tried shoving cannons with bare hands. The horses we had ridiculed as obsolete were now killing us with swords. The Wehrmacht absorbed a brutal lesson that winter. A paralyzed modern army dies faster than a mobile primitive one. But the dead horses left behind one final plague. 750,000 horse corpses lay scattered across the Eastern Front by spring 1942. When the snow melted, they decomposed. The contamination was inescapable. Rotting horses poisoned water sources for 50 miles in every direction. Dysentery swept through both armies. Typhus followed close behind. The German Sixth Army lost 9,000 men to disease in April 1942 alone, not to combat, to the biological aftermath of dead horses. Major Hans Müller, medical officer with the 4th Panzer Division. The stench reached us from 5 miles away. Clouds of flies so dense they darkened the sky. Men doubled over vomiting just from the smell. The Wehrmacht attempted to burn the carcasses, far too many. They tried digging mass graves. The earth was still frozen solid. They tried chemical treatment. They didn't have nearly enough. Spring 1942 became a biological wasteland. Horses that died in winter killed more Germans that spring through disease than Soviet weapons ever did. Hitler promised his soldiers glory. He delivered them. The apocalypse. The myth was magnificent. Armored columns, modern warfare, mechanical precision. The reality was grotesque. Frozen horses, starving troops, cannibalism, and massacre. 750,000 horses perished in a single winter. Those deaths triggered a cascade straight into hell. Germans murdered Germans over frozen scraps of meat. Some consumed their own comrades. Immobilized units were butchered beneath Cossack sabers. Disease from decomposing horses claimed thousands more. The Wehrmacht didn't lose because its soldiers lacked courage. They lost because they staked everything on horses in a land that annihilated horses. When the horses died, the army died. When the army died, the men became something less than human. Hitler's war machine was never real. It was propaganda layered over horseshit. And when the Russian winter arrived, that facade disintegrated, exposing desperate men dying alongside their horses. All of them victims of their leaders' lies about an army that never truly existed. The German soldiers who marched into Russia in 1941 expected to ride toward victory. Instead, they ate their rides. Then they ate each other. If this story gripped you, hit subscribe for more unforgettable historical deep dives every week. Thanks for watching.